Molten copper alloy is already waiting in the furnaces when the casting crew gathers around a huge sand mold. Hidden inside that mold is the entire shape of a ship's propeller, including every blade and the heavy hub at its center. Once the pour begins, the crew cannot stop halfway and correct a mistake. The metal has to reach every part of the cavity without carrying slag into casting or trapping defects that may remain invisible after the surface is cleaned. What comes out will eventually push a ship weighing tens of thousands of tons. At this point, however, it is still liquid metal entering a hole in the floor. The propeller may look like a simple rotating fan, but its shape is designed around one ship. Engineers work with the hull, engine power, operating speed, wake, and clearance near the stern. Water does not arrive at each blade evenly. The hull and rudder disturb the flow, so the load changes as the propeller turns. A design that ignores that wake can waste power, create vibration, or produce cavitation, where low pressure forms vapor bubbles that collapse near the blade. That creates a difficult compromise. Thin blades can help efficiency, but they still need enough strength for the loads they will carry. The pitch and blade area must absorb the engine's power without creating unacceptable noise, pressure pulses, or erosion. Designers use computational fluid dynamics to predict the water flow, then check the design with model tests and structural analysis. The final file does far more than show the propeller's diameter. It defines the changing angle, thickness, and curvature across every blade. For this journey, the main subject is a monoblock fixed-pitch propeller. Its blades and hub are cast as one piece, and the blade angle cannot change while the ship is operating. This is a common choice for large ocean-going container ships, tankers, and bulk carriers because it is efficient, robust, and mechanically simple. A controllable pitch propeller follows a different manufacturing route. Its separate blades mount into a mechanical hub, and hydraulics turn them during operation. That system can reverse thrust without reversing the shaft, but it requires far more assembly inside the hub. The giant one-piece casting on the factory floor is the fixed-pitch type.
Some manufacturers can build fixed-pitch propellers more than 36 feet across. Mecklenburger Metallguss in Germany says its range reaches 11.6 meters, or about 38 feet and 160 metric tons. Those are factory limits, and most orders are smaller. Each propeller is still made for a specific hull and shaft line, so its mold is a one-off tool rather than part of mass production. The mold turns the digital design into a full-size cavity in sand. One approach uses a physical pattern representing the blade. Modern factories may machine or 3D print parts of it from the design data. The crew packs and shapes prepared sand around that reference. The mold also needs channels to carry metal into the cavity and feeders that supply liquid metal as the casting contracts. There is no single molding method. Nakashima Propeller in Japan uses a process called 𝗤𝗂𝗃𝗲𝗄, or rotating mold. Instead of a complete full-size pattern, workers position a master form with numerical control data that gives the height and angle at reference points. They shape the sand between those points by hand. The computer defines the surface, but the crew still has to reproduce it across a blade several yards long. The hub needs its own internal shape, including enough extra material for the shaft bore to be machined later. The mold must also account for the fact that metal contracts as it cools. If the cavity represented only the final dimensions, the casting would come out undersized. Foundry engineers therefore add machining allowance and shrinkage compensation before any metal is poured. They also plan how the liquid will enter, where air can escape, and which areas need feeding as the thick hub and thinner blade sections solidify at different rates. Before casting day, the mold is dried. This matters because the metal must enter a dry cavity and because uncontrolled gas can create voids. The alloy is prepared in induction furnaces, often from a carefully controlled mix of copper and other elements. Large marine propellers commonly use copper alloys, including nickel, aluminum, bronze families, but the exact composition depends on the approved specification. The gold color does not mean the factory simply melts ordinary bronze and hopes for the right result. Samples from the melt are used to confirm its chemistry. Under the unified requirements used by major classification societies, the foundry must keep chemical analysis records, and at least one tensile test specimen is taken for each ladle. Test samples are cast in the same type of mold material and cooled under the same conditions as the propeller. Those samples cannot prove that every inch of a huge casting is perfect, but they do show whether the metal from that heat has the required mechanical properties. The liquid metal is also degassed before it enters the mold.
During the pour, the flow has to remain controlled. Turbulence can fold oxides into the metal or pull unwanted material into the casting. Foundry procedures use the runner system and slag control measures to keep the cavity filling as cleanly as possible. On the largest jobs, several furnaces or ladles may have to feed one pour in a coordinated sequence. The spectacular part lasts far less time than the preparation, but it creates the entire rough propeller in one operation. Then the factory waits. The hub contains far more metal than the blade edges, so the casting does not cool uniformly. The outside can become solid while thick sections continue releasing heat. Rushing this stage can leave residual stress or make later handling unsafe. Cooling time varies with the alloy, mold, propeller size, and foundry procedure, so there is no honest universal number. What matters is that solidification and cooling are treated as controlled parts of production, not dead time between casting and machining. Once the temperature is safe, workers break away the mold and recover the sand. Some factories treat and reuse molding sand, while copper-bearing scrap and removed metal can return to the material stream after proper processing. The casting it emerges is recognizable, but it does not have the mirror finish seen beneath a ship. Sand clings to the surface, the temporary runners and feeders are still attached, extra stock remains on the hub and blades, and the edges are deliberately thicker than their final dimensions. The first cleanup removes the molding material and the metal that was needed only for casting. Cutting and grinding expose the true surface, which is when obvious imperfections become easier to see. A small surface mark may be removable. A deep shrinkage cavity, crack, blowhole, or non-metallic inclusion is a different problem. Classification rules restrict how defects may be removed and where welding repairs are allowed. The most highly stressed parts near the blade root receive the strictest treatment because a repair there will face repeated loading every time the propeller turns. The rough casting now moves into machining. On a component this large, simply positioning it is a major operation. Cranes and turning devices place the propeller on a dedicated machine while the factory establishes a reliable center and reference plane. The hub bore is machined to match the propeller shaft. Its taper, diameter, and surface contact will determine whether engine torque can pass into the propeller without movement at the joint. Special milling machines then work across the blades. They remove casting allowance and bring the pressure side, suction side, leading edge, and trailing edge toward the designed geometry. 5-axis equipment can follow a complex curved surface while keeping the cutter at the required angle. It still does not make every part of the propeller automatically. Depending on the factory and design, machines may perform the heavy material removal while workers finish areas that are difficult to reach or better judged through continuous surface contact. This is where the scale can be misleading. A deviation that looks tiny on a 30-foot propeller can extend across a large area of the blade. That changes how the blade meets the water. It can shift load, alter cavitation behavior, or add pressure pulses at the stern. Factories therefore compare the machined surface with the design using templates, gauges, coordinate measurements, or optical scanning. The goal is not to make every propeller follow one universal shape. It is to prove that this propeller follows its own approved shape. Inspection continues throughout production and the finished casting receives formal checks. Current IACS requirements call for the manufacturer to visually inspect the entire casting. Liquid penetrant testing reveals surface breaking flaws the eye may miss. The most highly stressed zone is tested in the presence of a surveyor. Radiographic or ultrasonic testing can be added when the classification society or manufacturer considers it necessary. Dimensional reports go to the surveyor, and material records stay connected to the casting number. If a defect is repaired, the repair area is tested again. This traceability matters because polishing can make a surface look flawless without proving what lies beneath it. A propeller is accepted through measurements, material tests, inspection records, and approved repair limits, not through appearance alone. Balancing is another point that is often oversimplified. The current IACS rule for cast copper alloy propellers requires static balancing for every propeller covered by the rule. The propeller is supported so the factory can detect whether one angular position consistently falls under gravity. Material can then be adjusted within the approved geometry until the mass distribution meets the drawing. Dynamic balancing is required for propellers operating above 500 revolutions per minute. Giant direct drive ship propellers usually turn much more slowly, so it would be inaccurate to claim that every large propeller goes through a high-speed dynamic balancing machine. Finishing continues after the major measurements pass. Workers grind and polish the blade surfaces, especially the edges and the smooth transitions that guide water across the propeller. This is not decorative polishing. Roughness and local waviness can disturb the flow, while careless grinding can change the geometry that machining just established. Nakashima says its finishers can detect relative deviations around 1/100th of a millimeter within a continuous curved surface. The company is careful to explain that this is not an absolute tolerance for the entire blade. It describes the sensitivity needed to find a local high or low spot in a smooth curve. The hub bore receives the same attention because it has to fit the shaft in the shipyard. Some manufacturers verify this contact with physical gauges. Others use high-density measurements and compare the bore with the shaft's design data before delivery. Once the blade geometry, bore, surface, balance, and inspection records are accepted, identification marks and the final weight are recorded. Protective coverings are added where needed, and the propeller leaves the factory on a heavy transporter. Installation usually happens at the shipyard, often while the vessel is in dry dock and the stern tube and propeller shaft are already in place. The exact method depends on whether the connection is keyed, keyless, or flanged. On a common keyless installation, the bore and shaft taper are cleaned and checked, and both parts are allowed to reach a similar temperature. A crane holds the propeller in line with the shaft, then the hub is carefully pulled onto the taper. Hydraulic tools move at the final calculated distance. Oil pressure can reduce friction at the tapered contact, while a hydraulic nut pushes the hub forward. The important measurement is the specified axial push-up for the actual temperature, not the visual impression that the propeller looks tight. Once the correct position is reached, pressure is released so the interference fit grips the shaft. The retaining nut is secured, reference marks are added, and the cap and other final hardware can be installed. Survey requirements govern the fitting and its records. Only after the ship returns to the water can the finished propeller work in the flow it was designed for. During commissioning and sea trials, the shaft line, engine load, vibration, and vessel performance can be checked against expectations. The propeller's job is to turn engine power into thrust without allowing cavitation, pressure pulses, noise, or structural load to exceed the design limits. That is why the factory spends so much time on a shape that appears simple from the distance. The pour creates one enormous piece of metal, but the propeller becomes usable through everything that follows: controlled cooling, precise machining, inspection, balancing, finishing, and a measured fit on the shaft. When those steps work, the result does not need to look dramatic. It turns beneath the stern, carries the engine's torque into the water, and pushes the ship exactly as the design predicted.